but that the world seemed bleak and colorless when I lost my beloved husband Daniel. It was an accident, sudden, unexpected. My entire world shattered in an instant. Holding our 3-month-old baby girl, a leg close to my chest, the weight of our loss bore down on me, nearly crushing my spirit. But as the days turned into nights and weeks, transitioned into months, the tiny being in my arms gave me a reason to keep moving. As Ella grew, we created our own little universe. Our bond strengthened with every smile, every laugh, and every cry. I would often find solace in watching her sleep, her tiny fingers curled into a fist, and her soft breathing reassuring me of life's delicate beauty. "Mama, why do I not have a data like Lily from school?" Ella once asked, her innocent blue eyes searching my face for answers. Taking a deep breath, I responded, "Your data loved you very much, sweetie. He's watching over us from the stars. Hey, Mama, we have each other." The tears welled up in my eyes. "Yes, my love, always." Our days were filled with simple pleasures. We had a routine. Morning walks in the park, reading stories under the old oak tree, making daisy chains, and laughing over ice creams that dripped down our hands. Pick one particular day as we sat under our favorite tree. Calais, now 5, looked up with her brilliant eyes and said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you, strong and happy." I chuckled, pulling her into a hug. "And I hope, my darling, you'll always find joy and never face the storms instead." We were two halves of a whole, navigating life, understanding the depth of our love and cherishing the moments that came our way. Little did I know that the storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, ready to challenge the foundation we had built over the years. Each of the years flew by, and Ella blossomed into a young woman of grace and beauty. But it was on a bright summer afternoon when she came home with a radiance I hadn't seen in a while. The house echoed with her excitement, and I could hear her humming a tune as she hurriedly climbed the stairs. She called out, entering the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "I have something to tell you." I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping, and the sparkle in her eyes piqued my interest. Ella took a deep breath, her cheeks a rosy hue. "I met someone, Mom." Her declaration filled the room, and for a brief moment, a flurry of emotions coursed through me. The bright little girl, who once held my hand and spoke of stars, was now sharing tales of her heart. I couldn't help but feel a mix of joy, nostalgia, and the ever-present protective instinct. "That's wonderful, darling," I replied, trying to gauge her feelings. "Tell me about him." "He's different." But Ella started, choosing her words carefully. "He's passionate, ambitious, and sees the world so differently, I think." I nodded, listening intently. "How did you two meet?" "At the library," she said, a fond smile forming. "He was reading poetry, and we just started talking. One thing led to another, and before we knew it, hours had passed. We chatted late into the evening about James, with Ella sharing snippets of their conversations and moments they'd spent together. However, a small voice in my head urged caution. Of love, as beautiful as it is, can also be blinding. A few weeks later, Ella arranged for us to meet James. The day arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. I wanted so much for Ella's choice to be right for her. As the doorbell rang, Ella hurriedly answered, and in walked James, all with a sharply chiseled face. His presence dominated the room. Yet there was something in his demeanor, an air of arrogance, perhaps that set me on edge. "James, this is my mom," Ella introduced, her hand tucked into his. "Mom, meet James." "Usher to meet you." "James," I said, extending my hand. He looked at it briefly before shaking it, his grip firm, almost too firm. The evening was filled with polite conversations, with James speaking at length about his achievements and plans. However, his occasional curt replies and the way he often interrupted Ella left a sour taste in my mouth. Sure, that night, as I was tidying up, Ella came into the kitchen. "So, what do you think?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "He seems determined. But remember, love is also about respect, understanding, and kindness." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I know, Mom. Give it time." I hugged her close, hoping that my instincts were wrong and that this new chapter in Ella's life would be filled with happiness. Months turned into a whirlwind of dates, outings, and late-night phone calls for Ella and James. The intensity of their relationship was palpable, and I watched from the sidelines, hoping for the best while still harboring reservations. One crisp put-on evening, Ella entered our home with a glow that seemed to light up the entire room. Though a delicate, gleaming diamond adorned her left ring finger. She barely had her coat off before she was rushing into the living room, her excitement impossible to contain. "Mom, ow!" She beamed, extending her hand for me to see the ring. As a patient, I was momentarily taken aback, my emotions a mix of happiness for Ella and the nagging worry that had never quite gone away, but seeing the joy in Ella's eyes. I swallowed my concerns and enveloped her in a tight embrace. "It's wonderful news, sweetheart," I whispered, pulling back to look at her. "How did he ask?" Ella's eyes took on a dreamy quality. It was at the park, our special spot. He'd set up a surprise picnic with candles, and when I arrived, he was reciting a poem he'd written for me. Then, in the soft glow of the evening, he got down on one knee. Thought would be as brosy too. It sounded romantic, and a part of me wanted to get swept up in the fairy tale she painted. He truly went all out. "I'm happy for you, dear." Just over the next few weeks, our home was abuzz with wedding plans. Invitations, dresses, venues. Everything seemed like a blur. Ella was on cloud 9, and her happiness was infectious. However, the few times I interacted with James during these preparations, I couldn't shake off the unease his demeanor caused. One afternoon, as I was sifting through invitation designs, James and Ella had a disagreement over the guest list. His voice was raised, his tone sharp. "Why do you need to invite all these people? Most of them are your mother's friends, not ours," James argued. Ella, trying to keep the peace, replied, James, it's our wedding. Both our families and friends should be there. And yes, some of Mom's close friends watched me grow up. But they're like family. He scoffed. Seems like she's running the show. Hearing this, I intervened. After connections. James, this is a special day for both of you. It's important to make decisions together. His gaze locked onto mine, cold and unyielding. Of course, Chloe, but it's our wedding, not yours. Ella stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. Let's take a break, both of you. We can revisit this later. I gave a small nod, retreating to my room. The sense to get confrontation had solidified my fears, but every time I tried to voice my concerns, I brushed them aside, attributing them to wedding stress. The day of the engagement party arrived. Friends and family gathered, showering the couple with love and blessings. Yet, through the merriment, I couldn't help but sense the undercurrents of tension. That night, as the last guest left and Ella and I sat, exhausted, on the couch, she leaned into me. Nam, I know you have your doubts, but I love him. I sighed, brushing a strand of hair off her face. I just want you to be happy and treated with the love and respect you deserve. She smiled softly. I know. Mom, I promise everything will be perfect. Little did we know, the road ahead would be anything but. After the wedding, a veil of silence seemed to descend upon our once close-knit relationship. Ella and James moved into a house on the other side of town, and my visits to their home were limited. I missed our daily chats, our shared laughter, and the bond that had always been our stronghold. Ella's voice on our occasional phone calls sounded distant, often hurried, and I felt a chasm widening between us. One evening, I decided to surprise Ella with a visit. Was arriving at their home, I noticed the unkempt garden with overgrown grass and wilting flowers. It was unlike Ella, who had always been passionate about gardening. I rang the doorbell and waited. Ella opened the door, looking drained and pale, her once vibrant eyes shadowed with fatigue. Mom, she whispered, sounding genuinely surprised. But before I could respond, a voice from inside called out. Ella, it's Mom. James, Ella replied, her voice wavering slightly. I stepped inside, taking in the mess of unwashed dishes, scattered papers, and general disarray. I thought I'd drop by and see how you've been. I began, my heart heavy. And James appeared, a forced smile on his face. Chloe, this is unexpected. I just wanted to spend some time with Ella. I responded, trying to keep my tone even. James's eyes flicked between Ella and me. Sure, just make sure it's not too long. We have plans. The Ella gave a weak nod, leading me to the living room. We sat, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of the clock. Ella, I started gently. Is everything okay? You seem... She took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting. It's just... I reached out, taking her hands in mine. Darling, you can always talk to me, no matter what. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. I know. Mom, it's just a phase. We'll get through it. But the weight of her unspoken words hung heavy in the room. My instinct screamed that something was amiss, but without Ella opening up, I was at a loss. As I was leaving, I pulled her into a tight embrace. "Remember, you're not alone. You have me," she whispered back, almost inaudibly. "I know. Mom, I love you." These days turned into weeks, and my concern grew with every passing moment. Each time I tried reaching out, there seemed to be a wall that neither of us could breach. Ella's life appeared to be spiraling, and I felt helpless watching from the outside. But late one night, a call from an unknown number lit up my phone. Answering it, I was met with sobs. "Mom," Ella's voice trembled. "I need you." My heart raced as I grabbed my keys, the urgency in her voice echoing in my ears. The dark days had descended, but I was determined to bring my daughter back to the light. The drive to LA's home felt like an eternity. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each more harrowing than the last. When I arrived, the house was eerily silent, the only light emanating from the living room window. I didn't bother knocking, pushing the door open. I prepared to like stories. I found LA sitting on the floor, her back against the sofa, tears streaming down her face. I rushed to her side, pulling her into my arms. "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated, taking a shuddering breath. He lost his temper again. "Mom," he threw a vase at me and then he left. Her voice trailed off, her fingers tracing the red mark on her forearm where the vase had struck. Anger and despair welled up inside me. "Ella, this has to stop. That can't go on like this." She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and defeat. "I thought he'd change. Mom, I thought our love would be enough. But every time he gets angry, it just gets worse." I cupped her face, making her look at me. "But you deserve so much better than this. Elaine, no one should ever make you feel afraid or less than." She nodded, burying her face in my shoulder. "I know, Mom, but I'm scared. What if he comes after me? We'll deal with it," I said, determination flooding me. "But right now you're coming home with me." We packed a few essentials, and just as we were about to leave, a team's car pulled into the driveway. "We can't," flashed in LA's eyes. "Mom, we need to go. Now." I took her hand, leading her towards the back door, but before we could make our exit, James stormed in. "Where do you think you're going?" "Ella," he spat, his eyes dark with rage. "Is coming with me," I interjected, placing myself protectively between him and LA. He laughed coldly. "And what do you think you can do?" "Chloe," raced before I could respond, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. James' face drained of color. "What have you done?" Ella, with newfound courage, replied, "I called the police." "James, I won't let you hurt me anymore." Moments later, police officers entered the house, arresting James. As they led him away, handcuffed, I held Ella close. We watched in silence, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging. But with the first step taken, there was hope. That night, back at my home, we sat together, sipping on hot cocoa, a small semblance of the old times. "Thank you, Mom," Ella whispered. I squeezed her hand. "Always, my love, always." The decision to stand up against James, to bring him to justice, was only the beginning. But as a mother, there was nothing I wouldn't do to protect my child. The weeks following James' arrest were a tumultuous blend of court hearings, counseling sessions, and quiet moments where Ella and I attempted to rebuild the fragments of our shattered lives. And with every passing day, the weight of what she endured became evident, but so too did her indomitable spirit. Seen one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Ella spoke up, her voice contemplative. "No, like Mom, I've been thinking a lot about my life, about the choices I made and where they led me." I looked over, giving her an encouraging nod. "And what have you realized?" She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "That sometimes we wear blinders, we choose to see only what we want, ignoring the red flags, the warnings." I convinced myself that love was enough to change James, to erase his flaws, but in doing so, I lost myself. When my heart ached for her, for the pain she had gone through. "Ella, we all make mistakes, but it's never too late to make things right, to find your path again." I smiled weakly. "I know. And that's what I want to do. I want to go back to school, finish my degree, maybe even open that little bakery I always dreamed of." My eyes welled up with tears of pride. "That sounds wonderful, and I'll be right here cheering you on every step of the way." She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice soft. "I know. Thank you, Mom, for everything." The next few months were transformative. Ella re-enrolled in college, taking up courses she had left behind. She immersed herself in her studies, finding solace in learning and the company of friends who supported her journey. The dream of her bakery began to take shape, and together we would spend weekends testing out recipes, laughing at failed experiments, and celebrating the successes. One day, as we decorated cupcakes in the kitchen, Ella looked up, her eyes shining with tears. "Like Mom, I've been offered an internship at a renowned patisserie in Paris. It's a 6-month program." I paused, processing the news. "That's amazing. Ella, but are you sure you're ready?" She nodded, determination evident in her posture. "I need this. Like to Mom. I need Texas. To rediscover myself, to find my passion again." I hugged her tightly. "And you should go. Spread your wings, just promise to come back to me." Ella chuckled, wiping away her tears. "Actual always. This will always be home." The day Ella left for Paris was bittersweet. Watching her embark on this new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride and sorrow. But above all, I felt hope. But Ella's time in Paris was transformative. She thrived, honing her skills and building connections. Her letters home were filled with tales of her adventures, of the people she met, and the lessons she learned. By the time she returned, Ella was a changed woman, but stronger, more confident, and ready to take on the world. She opened her bakery, which quickly gained popularity. But more than the success, it was the joy she radiated that marked the real turning point. But life has a way of testing us, of pushing us to our limits. But as Ella's journey showed, with love, resilience, and the unwavering support of family, it's possible to emerge from the darkest days into the light of a new beginning.